There's nothing specific and nothing credible out there right now, but we are tracking all threat streams, and we certainly work with our partners at the FBI and other intelligence agencies that supply that information to us. I think that the environment that we're dealing with today is certainly different than it was 4 years ago. I'm sure we'll see an evolution in the next 4 years as well, but it is definitely something that we take into consideration.
Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle last Sunday, joined now by former Secret Service Special Agent Paul Eckloff, who serves on the protective detail for 3 presidents. Paul, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to ask you the question I asked Pierre Thomas earlier in the program. Hard to believe that someone could get on a rooftop that close to a presidential rally.
Well, sir, when you look at the campaign events, they're designed far differently than presidential protection. Many people are saying this was an attempt on President Trump, realizing that it is former President Trump. They are afforded less protection than sitting presidents by authorization, and campaign events are designed for access and viewing of Mr. Trump rather than security. The Secret Service does an exemplary job in advancing these sites. The unfortunate reality is they exist as we know them today because of a history of political violence in America. And their response is going to be primarily reactionary. And what we saw yesterday, if you dissect the tape, was a textbook response. I think it's important for people to understand when you see that counter sniper technician take out the threat, that until he identified it as a threat, it was an individual from 200 yards moving on a rooftop. If he had neutralized that threat, or shot an innocent civilian that just happened to be trying to get a view of former President Trump, we'd be having a very different conversation. He had a very difficult job, identified the threat, and neutralized it within a second. And the agents willingly moved onto the stage, shielding former President Trump with their own bodies. I think that people need to realize, and Americans don't realize, it's a very unique situation for the Secret Service, as I experienced as well. Secret Service agents wear body armor, but it is not to protect their own lives. It is to shield the protectee with their own bodies, their own flesh, and to ensure that any further attempts do not go through them and hit the protectee.
And it's a reminder, there's just no such thing as perfect security.
Absolutely. It is a matter of risk assessment, risk tolerance. It is a constant back and forth between the Secret Service and the campaign detail who decides where and when these events occur and how they are secured. Until that individual identified himself as a threat, nothing could be done. Now, there will be a time to dissect and look at the security plan, but with the Republican convention as a national special security event, far more security will be in place. And when I watched those friends of mine and my former colleagues storm the stage going toward gunfire, shielding, covering, and evacuating the former president, it gave me a realization that their mettle was tested, and they passed that. The Secret Service does advances in the White House, throughout the world, on the streets of war zones. And yesterday it happened to be on a field in Pennsylvania when they shielded, covered, and evacuated. And today, President Trump is alive because of the brave men and women of the Secret Service.
There's just no question that they were absolutely heroic in the immediate aftermath of that shooting. And you hit on something else important that I think you should explain to people, because I remember from my time in campaigns in the White House as well, there actually is an ongoing dialogue between the Secret Service and the candidates, and there's always a back and forth over how approachable the candidate wants to be and what the Secret Service needs to do for protection.
That's absolutely true. There are constant conversations. It reminds me, I was the lead advance agent for President Obama's train stop in Baltimore on the way for his inauguration in Washington, D.C. It was a historic time for America. I remember very early talking to the campaign staff, and they were very relieved that he was going to be in Memorial Park in front of 40,000 people in the center of Baltimore. And when we were doing the advance, they said, well, it'll be great, because in the campaign, we put the magnetometer 75 yards away. And I looked at them and I said, well, welcome to the White House. I will have the magnetometers 3 blocks away, and I will be shutting down the entire city center. There's an entirely different stance, protective advance, and assets put in place for sitting presidents versus campaign stops. And that is a constant give and take. The Secret Service would love nothing more than if the president stayed in the White House and stayed behind a secure perimeter. That's simply not the reality of politics or the American democracy. The people demand and should expect access to the people that represent them.
Paul Eckloff. Thanks for your insight and your time. Thanks very much.